Hey everybody, we are in day 242 in our Bible reading plan, Job 30 through 33 and Psalm 29. And we are making our way through this great book of Job that I hope is encouraging you. Today we're going to meet Elihu, and we'll talk about him in a second. But let me remind you of this big idea that even the best explanations about God fail to bring the comfort and answers that those who are suffering will find in God alone. Ultimately, you can talk about God, you can try to conjecture all that. Good morning, by the way, a little coffee here. You can conjecture about him, you can theologize. These are all good things. Theology affects our feelings, but ultimately, there's a point where we got to stop thinking about God and simply running to God. And Job is at the end of his wits. He's at the end of his words. He reviews some of the things that we've already heard him say. He thinks about others who used to respect him and now laugh at him. He says in verse 19 of chapter 30, God has cast me into the mire and I've become like dust and ashes. There's a little bit of self-pity there. I think you can appreciate that. He says, I cry to you for help and you do not answer me. How often do we feel like we're praying, but God doesn't hear and doesn't answer? And so really understand this lament of Job. He says, I stand and you only look at me. You have turned cruel to me. And of course, he's mischaracterizing, misjudging God. We're going to see that in a minute. But he's doing it out of pain. And I think God sees and understands that, because we'll see by God's reaction to Job shortly. He says, my inward parts are in turmoil and never still. Have you ever had a difficult time stilling the noise not around you, but inside you? I go about darkened, but not by the sun. And you know, his final appeal, he says, I've made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a virgin? He's just, again, reminding his listeners that he really has not intentionally sinned. He has heard his friends accuse him of sin, but he's like, look, man, I've done everything I can. I've tried to help the poor. I've tried not to hoard, etc., etc. Well, he quiets down, and then chapter 32, we meet Elihu. Elihu, who later is not directly rebuked by God, who has been fodder for theology debates. Is it that God agreed with him, or is it that God just didn't care enough to answer him? I don't think that's the case, but this guy's younger. He's been listening for a long time. You got to give him credit. He's been patient, and what comes out of his mouth, again, is a different argument than the friends. He doesn't say Job has sinned. In fact, he's just justifying God's justice. And he says, listen, God always has a purpose in the pain. So what he says, I believe, is true, but albeit a little heartless. Have you ever heard people throw biblical truth at you, and it just sounds, it's true in your head, in your heart, but you just feel unloved by them? And that's sort of the impression I get from Elihu. And so he rants for a while. His passage is 4 or 5 chapters long. We're going to be with him today and tomorrow. And so try to read it, and again, without casting too much judgment like I just did. But remember, again, that ultimately, even the biggest theology teachers can only take you so far. At the end of the day, what brings us comfort are the words of Jesus. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest does not come out of theological truth. It comes from running to the heart of God. And the reason we spend our time daily with God, and why we're continuing to do this daily reading plan, is that it's bringing us into God's presence. It's a tool, it's a means. Of course, God's word is alive and active. And so I pray that you're finding rest in God, no matter what suffering you might be going through right now. Love you guys. I'm praying for you, and I hope you find your rest in God today. Take care.